Good evening from Westminster. Boris Johnson has suffered another two major setbacks today for his Brexit strategy. Earlier this evening, a cross-party group of MPs was successful in getting a bill passed to try to prevent a no-deal Brexit. And the bill, which is now going to the House of Lords, would force the Prime Minister to do something that he's repeatedly ruled out. That is, asking the EU for yet another Brexit delay unless a deal is secured. The Prime Minister's response was to call for a general election on October the 15th, but he's failed to get sufficient support for that when MPs voted within the past half hour. We start with this report on the day's events so far from our political editor, Laura Kuensberg.
Are we through the looking glass now? The Prime Minister's demanding a new Parliament over there, an election, yet he says he doesn't want one. The other parties say they do, but may yet stand in his way. It won't be settled until the Commons closes the door on the possibility that Boris Johnson could take us out of the EU next month without a deal.
Have you lost control, Prime Minister?
His Brexit at any cost.
Order. Questions to the Prime Minister.
But if he gets his way, this first joust of shouting in Prime Minister's questions could be his last.
Prime Minister.
Can he confirm now that he will allow the people of this country to decide on what he is giving up in their name with a general election on October the 15th? Or is he for it? There's only one chlorinated chicken that I can see in this house, and he's on that bench.
He's desperate, absolutely desperate, to avoid scrutiny.
The riposte, read his lips. You were a great big girl's blouse.
And in his third day in office, after 5 questions from me, we haven't had an answer to any of them.
That might entertain some. But Boris Johnson is a leader that repels as well as attracts. A Labour MP demanding an apology that never came for a controversial column he wrote a year ago.
Those of us who from a young age have had to endure and face up to being called names such as Towelhead or Taliban or coming from Bongo land, we can appreciate full well the hurt and pain felt by already vulnerable Muslim women when they are described as looking like bank robbers and letterboxes.
The Tory bench is still and mute while the applause went on and on. Many of them shocked too by the fate of some of their colleagues, kicked out of the party last night after voting against the Prime Minister.
I had lots of phone calls from people saying you're doing the right thing.
With 20 others, Anne Milton was thrown out of the Tory party last night for voting against the Prime Minister.
I voted against government whip for the first time in 14 years of being a Member of Parliament.
Did you receive a call last night to tell you they were doing what they threatened to do, they were throwing you out?
Yes, I had a conversation with the Chief Whip who made it clear that that's what was going to happen. I feel quite sad that it has come to this, but I woke up this morning and knew I'd done the right thing.
She, like a slim majority of MPs, believe leaving the EU without a deal could be a disaster and are intent on changing the law to remove even the chance. They crowded into the voting lobbies tonight, disbelieving as the idea of bringing Theresa May's plan back appeared to pass by mistake.
The ayes to the right, 327. The noes to the left, 299.
But they were successful at this stage, voting to prevent the Prime Minister taking us out of the EU in October if no deal is in place.
Shaving foam.
Now it's up to the House of Lords, though, preparing to bed down to talk and talk until it's done, racing against the deadline before Parliament shuts next week. A group of anti-no-deal MPs, led by the man who was Chancellor a few weeks ago, even marched themselves to the Lords tonight, as if to make sure they do their business. The chances now of this bloc failing, tonight peeping in at the edge of the Lords, seems slim. So the main battle inside might soon be outside, if, or more likely when, a general election is finally called. Whatever you want.
I don't know. There's so much voter apathy, and it feels like the country's split down the middle almost.
It's a bit crazy, isn't it, really? Just think, yeah, it is. Thought it couldn't really get any more peculiar and, strange.
This, the first official request.
There must now be an election on Tuesday, the 15th of October, and I invite the right honourable gentleman to respond to decide which of us goes as Prime Minister to that crucial council.
Labour says not yet, not until the anti-no deal plan becomes law, but that could be in days.
I look forward to the day his government and his party and all their austerity and misery they've heaped on this country are turfed out of office. It's a cynical movement from a cynical Prime Minister.
So if he wants an election, extend Article 50 for the purposes of having a general election and bring it on.
Once a no deal has been blocked, MPs across this House on the opposition benches should come together to bring down this government.
This Parliament is crumbling in front of us, but not ready to choose to end itself yet.
I do think the Prime Minister, with the greatest respect, has a tremendous skill in keeping a straight face whilst he's being so disingenuous.
If the right honourable gentleman who leads the Labour Party right now genuinely believes in democracy, put up or shut up.
When it came, the decision was against number 10. Labour abstained.
The ayes to the right, 298. The noes to the left, 56.
Confident in the bunker. It's not no for good. It's a no, not yet.
Well, here at outside Houses of Parliament, Laura's with me. Yes, the hint at the end of there, Laura, was that that's not the end of the story on elections.
It's certainly not the end of the story on the elections at all, for several reasons. Number one, Boris Johnson is absolutely intent of finding his way out of this dead end by going to the country. Number two, the opposition parties are not saying we will never countenance a general election sometime soon. They're saying not until the anti-no deal law is on the statute book. And at that point, it could very well be game on. Although we should say there are doubts, particularly on the Labour backbenches, about the wisdom of having an election before Brexit Day. But Jeremy Corbyn reaffirmed the official party line, which is when the legislation becomes law, at that point they will back an election. But there's a broader point if we look back to history. The government doesn't have a majority. After Boris Johnson turfed out more than 20 of his own MPs last night, he does not have the power to be able to govern as he pleases. And governments without a majority can't last. Sooner or later, he's going to have to ask all of us what we think they should all do next.
Let's go back a few hours to before that vote, because MPs decided they did want to press ahead with that bill which is designed to prevent a no-deal Brexit.
Yes, and that is at the very, very heart of this controversy. We've got a Parliament that is determined to close down the possibility that Boris Johnson would take us out of the European Union without a deal. There are too many people in that building behind us who think that could be a catastrophe to allow it to happen. Now, MPs have had their say at breakneck speed. They have voted to change the law, but it has to now, and it's just starting to tonight, make its way through the House of Lords. But given the makeup of the upper chamber, it's very likely that it will be on the statute book before too long. And of course that means that question of the election will be right back in front of MPs, and potentially very, very quickly indeed. But just one thing today, if our viewers have thought the last few years we've seen raucous, edgy, brutal debate down here at Westminster, dividing opinion in the way that we can hear it happening behind us here tonight, in the last couple of days when MPs have been back, the tone has been more contemptuous, more bitter, more brutal. And in terms of looking for some kind of healing, some kind of bringing people together, things seem to be getting worse before they can get better at some point.
OK, Laura, thanks very much again. Laura Kuenssberg there for us, our political editor, with her latest thoughts after the votes that we've had here at Westminster today. And as Laura was suggesting, this latest stage in the Brexit battle has exposed all of the divisions across Parliament in many ways, but certainly within the Conservative Party, and exposed them more vividly than ever before. The 21 Conservative MPs who Laura mentioned there, who voted against the government last night, were immediately suspended. and they've been told they can't stand for the party at the next election. Among them were former cabinet ministers, including Philip Hammond, who until recently was Chancellor, and Rory Stewart, and party grandees such as Sir Nicholas Soames, the grandson of Winston Churchill, and the longest-serving current MP, the former Chancellor Ken Clarke. Our correspondent Alex Forsyth has been to Mr Clarke's constituency of Rushcliffe to talk to people there, and there are some flashing images in the report coming up.
At Rushcliffe Conservative Association, there's been one key face for nearly 50 years. Ken Clarke is the longest-serving Tory MP and has held some of the biggest jobs in government. But last night, he was effectively kicked out of the party. The chairman of the local branch thinks it was the right move because, like 20 other Tory MPs, he voted to stop a no-deal Brexit.
At the end of the day, the fact is he voted against the government, and the consequences are you have the whip withdrawn from you. I think Boris has shown that he is a strong Prime Minister, and I do support him, and I think he had to show that he continues to be a strong Prime Minister.
Even though most people here in Rushcliffe voted to remain in the EU, some local Tories have been angry at their MP's pro-European stance, a symbol of the fractures in the party. Divisions over Europe have plagued the Tories for decades and put an end to the careers of several Prime Ministers. But this long-running row has never seen so many Tory MPs effectively thrown out of their party all at once. Among them, the grandson of Winston Churchill, Nicholas Soames, seen here as a boy, is furious at what's happened.
Such a stupid and unfortunate message to our supporters and would-be voters in the country that what was a wonderfully broad, tolerant, humane church has now become a narrow sect.
With Westminster poised for an election, some of the expelled MPs were already standing down, but there could be a fight from others who still want to represent the Tories. Rory Stewart found out he wasn't welcome in the party, just as he was accepting an award for being Politician of the Year.
I'm not going to be able to stand as a Member of Parliament because Boris has decided he doesn't want me in the party.
The former leadership candidate says he's not giving up on the Conservatives.
I really hope the party comes to its senses, because this is not the way that Mrs Thatcher would have behaved. This is not the way any previous Prime Minister would behave. This is trying to deselect very loyal Conservative ministers and cabinet ministers who've barely rebelled in their lives.
Philip Hammond, the former Chancellor, arrived at Parliament today no longer a Conservative MP. His association in Runnymede says, therefore, he can't stand for them. But he suggested he might fight back, even explore legal options. The Conservative Party says the rules are clear. If someone wants to stand for the Tories in an election, they have to be on an approved list or a member of the party in Parliament. But if there is a battle over this, it will only deepen the existing rift. Back in Ken Clarke's constituency, there's little harmony among voters either.
It should support his party. We voted him in to do that and he hasn't done it, so that's it.
People should be able to express themselves politically, sometimes outside what the party thinks.
There is no Conservative Party anymore, is there? There's two completely split rival camps now that can't really be under the same umbrella.
So the division in the Tory party is, it seems, playing out across the country. Alex Forsyth, BBC News, Rushcliffe.
Now, a judge at the highest court in Scotland has thrown out an attempt to have Boris Johnson's decision to suspend Parliament for 5 weeks declared unlawful. A group of MPs and peers had brought the case to the Court of Session in Edinburgh, arguing that the Prime Minister had exceeded his powers. But the judge there said it was not a matter for the courts, and the group's appeal will be held tomorrow. So, as we've heard, a cross-party alliance of MPs, we were discussing it earlier, has voted for legislation to try to block a no-deal Brexit and to force the Prime Minister to ask for yet another Brexit delay unless a deal is agreed. So let's think about how things might develop from here, and our Deputy Political Editor, John Pienaar, has been investigating.
Wherever you stand, all you can do is watch. See how British politics has changed almost beyond recognition. Traditions of consensus and compromise discarded. In there, the argument has become as angry and bitter as it is out here. Yesterday, Boris Johnson lost the first round. Even some Tory critics say he overplayed his hand, treated the rebels too harshly. He's on the losing side again today, but now Boris Johnson has set his sights on an early election, and this deadly serious game is on.
Point of order, Mr. Nicholas.
MPs are ploughing in a single day through the bill to block no deal and delay Brexit. More than enough of them to beat the government. Labour, SNP and Plaid, Lib Dems and the Tory outcasts. Many different aims but a single plan. Stop a no-deal Brexit. So what does the rebel alliance want? Well, to outlaw no deal, obviously, and opposition leaders want an election after that mission's accomplished. Meanwhile, in meetings, on social media, in the tea rooms and among the statues, some outcast Tories and Labour MPs want a Brexit deal. Others want a referendum. Labour's promising one after the election, maybe on a new deal if there is one. Otherwise, a choice between no deal and remain. And that's what the Lib Dem wants. They say, though, stop Brexit. And so does the SNP, who believe this crisis could be taking us closer to an independent Scotland, the end of the Union. Now, down there, perhaps the most genteel debating chamber in the democratic world, well, things are about to turn ugly.
This country has high standards.
The Lords must pass the rebel bill too. In debates about debates, opposing sides doing all they can to support or resist the attempt to rule out a no-deal Brexit and bind the Prime Minister's hands by law. Signs are it'll be as passionate, maybe as bad-tempered as the upper house ever gets. What then? What's the Prime Minister's plan? Well, on October the 15th election, if only the Commons would let him, but it takes 2/3 of MPs to agree to an early election. That's 434 of them.
The ayes to the right, 298. The noes to the left, 56.
And we saw the numbers weren't there. Well, what about Labour? They look split. Some close to Jeremy Corbyn say they'd like to move within days to back an early election. Others want to wait until they can force Boris Johnson to break his defining promise and seek a Brexit extension in Brussels, though he's promised we'd leave, deal or no deal, by October the 31st. Humiliation. The outcome? Anyone's guess. If this was a game, it would be gripping. But this is no game.